of the organ racing. Oh, thank you, Micah. It is 3:36 p.m. This is Commissioner Barry. I call this meeting of the Oregon Racing Commission Medication and Safety Committee meeting to order. The roll call. Connie, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Connie Nguyen is here, and Dr. Everman, for the record, are you here?
I am here, thank you.
And Commissioner Fowler.
I'm here.
Great. And of course, our chair for this committee, Commissioner Barry, is here. And Mike, our providing steward, is on FEMLA for a family emergency, so he will not be in today.
All right. First meeting or first agenda item is to approve the meeting agenda. Any objections to approving it? So approved. No old business, or rather, what we had for old business has been addressed in the commission meeting. So there'll be movement forward on the rulemaking process, is my understanding.
Correct.
Okay, good. For today's business, I guess that would be follow-up items based on the commission meeting, if any, which is our first item. What would our next steps be on that?
So it sounds like Commissioner Barry, chair of the committee, it sounds like the recommendation is that there's two rules that we need further discussion on. So I would recommend that you lead a discussion on those two rules. The first was the, of course, I don't have that pack up now.
Yeah, and I made a note also. Well, let me pull it.
Hang on. The first one is, let's just handle the tough one first, which is prohibited substances. And I think there's a number of comments that some people might want to make, and we should go through that, and then you need to decide what you want to do with that, or what your recommendations are, and that's really you and Commissioner Fowler's decision with everybody's input. So that is, hang on, I'm going to bring it up on the screen, and then you can.
That would be great. Thank you.
Let's do that, provided I can. And Malia, if I don't have the right to, would you please give it to me?
We should currently be co-hosts.
Oh, good. I'm a co-host. I feel special. Share screen. And why isn't it letting me share my screen now? I'm gonna do this screen actually. Move this over here. Hopefully you all can see this. What do you see? Do you see this rule in front of you, or do you see?
Nothing.
Right now it's
see
just a meeting.
See all your pretty faces. That's it.
Oh, let me put over here and try that again. Okay. No, I don't want that one. I want that one, but that's not what's on there. Let's see what happens here.
There you go.
There you are.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you see it. Yay. Okay. So, I know there were some questions and concerns on this. Shall we start with the 40 hours before the post time for the race, which are entered? And I'll just tell you up front, I'm sorry. I think this is a really good idea. I'm not the commissioner, it's you guys' call. But we want to hear everybody's opinion on this. So, Commissioner Barry?
I guess, are there any anybody who'd like to say why they don't think these changes are a good idea? Or why we should make some other change instead?
I've got my hand up.
Oh, Please, go ahead.
This is Dr. Alice Lombard. So there's just some little line items throughout here. So I don't know if we want to go through the changes one by one. I think the 48 hours is very reasonable, so I don't have an issue with that. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that before I move on.
If I think anything that we don't have a dissenting opinion on, we can accept. So it's really
Okay.
only things that need either to be further clarified or adjusted in some way.
I think going from 2 micrograms to 0.3 micrograms per milliliter in phenylbutazone is a big change. 0.3 micrograms is what is RMTC, and forgive me, I always fall back to that because that's the body that does all the testing that makes the recommendations to HISA. So when I say RMTC, I'm generally saying HISA rules. So forgive me, I go back and forth. But so that is what HISA is. And that is for thoroughbreds. Again, same with the flunixin going from 20 to 5. So that would be going back from where we're at to HISA. The 2 and the 20 is what we still run quarter horses at in our neighboring state of Washington, and most quarter horses around the nation run at 2 and 20. So I think there was the good discussion that was started that Dave Nelson brought up as well. Quarter horses, they're different in a lot of ways, and this is one of them, and I think we need to respect that. I think that running on 2 micrograms per milliliter is very reasonable, especially when we're given it 48 hours, so we know that our pre-race tests were not right there at our 18 hours really, or even sometimes closer. We're really truly a day out when we're doing our pre-race tests, and that's before the horses run. We can really see how sound they are. But I think that change is too big of a leap and unnecessary for quarter horses.
Dr. Everman.
Well, can you hear,
We would
can you hear
we
me?
would
Okay?
concur with this.
Yes, I
ahead.
think that we definitely do not want to have, since we're not HISA, we definitely do not want 2 separate rules for thoroughbreds versus quarter horses. On the phenylbutazone, we are currently at 2 micrograms per milliliter, and that's what 90% of the horses are running on. The ketoprofen and flunixin are both shorter acting, even though they have possibly a longer detection time as far as their effective time frame when they will ameliorate pain in a horse. The phenylbutazone is the longest acting of these 3 that are allowed, and we might go to 0.5 instead of 0.3. But other than that, I don't see any problem here. And I talked to the lab about the ketoprofen. The reason that it is currently at 2 nanograms per mil, and we left it there, is because the lab said they had a problem with detecting it at a lower level. So I think that being a permissible level at 48 hours is still fine.
I just think going from 2 to 0.3 is a big difference. And it essentially means that horses will not run on phenylbutazone, period.
That's kind of the idea.
Well, so we know that horses are more likely to break down on the contralateral limb from the limb that they are sore on.
Well, if they're sore, they should be eliminated from racing, period.
But they're usually not sore enough to show up in pre-race.
Not if they're given the butte 24 hours prior to the pre-race exam.
But
At
if they're giving
48
it-
hours, they might be.
But if they're giving it at 48 hours, why give it? Why change this? What are we really reducing breakdown rates?
Oh, we're definitely helping the horse, because if they're lame and the horsemen think that giving it 48 hours out is of no value, which it probably isn't, then just don't enter the horse.
But if you're giving 2 grams of butte at 48 hours, you're going to be over threshold.
You shouldn't be.
According to
If we
RMPC, you will.
change it 0.3 to 0.5, and they are actually, the problem most of these horsemen have is that they give it orally, and that really changes the, all the guidance is based on a single intravenous injection. So if a horse is given the butte orally on a daily basis for several days, and the last dose is 48 hours before the race, then they'll probably be over. You're right. And then people are gonna have to learn that. If that
And
horse,
Well, we also know that different horses, I mean, we did a study with Dr. Cattler, it wasn't a formalized study, but we went through all of our butte levels for a while when we went from 5 to 2 about 5-6 years ago in Oregon. We went from 5 to 2 micrograms. And
Right.
in that period, we had a grace period for horsemen where they could come look at their levels. So of course, it was only the horses that went to the test barn and were tested, but those horses could come and see what their levels were. And most people were given it at 36 hours and they were giving 2 grams. And there was at least 40% of those horses were still over 2.
Well, they definitely, I would like to add that we definitely would have to have whatever changes we make, we're gonna have to have an educational outreach. And we're gonna have to get all this information out there and explain to them what's going on. And we would have to give them, an initial grace period perhaps.
I see
Doctor-
this as just more bad tests versus fewer breakdowns. I really don't think that this is going to change the safety or well-being of the horse by going from 2 to 0.3.
Doctors, I have
thing that
a,
we're
I have a
gonna do.
question for both of you guys. Are these NSAIDs any better for the horse's liver than they are for mine?
yes. Phenylbutazone is extremely bad for humans. It's almost never used in humans. It's actually very safe in horses, causes stomach ulcers sometimes, but other than that, it usually does not cause a problem. Banamine Flunix is actually worse for the horse as far as stomach ulcers. And the biggest problem I see with the phenylbutazone with the race horses is that a lot of people are giving it to horses that do not need it and are not benefiting from it. So I think I talked to Mike Twiggs about a grace period also, and he's completely on board with that, that we should have a period of time when we change a rule that people get used to it and realize their methodology that they're using to administer the drug and what it's producing as far as the level in the horse. And we need to, accommodate the horse people certainly so that they understand what's happening.
Okay.
The other issue, and I still am on board with the 48 hours, but I think it's something that we need to say out loud and recognize, is we are a very fair-based state. These horses oftentimes will come to a 4-day meet and run on day 1 and run on day 3 or 4. And a lot of these people maybe aren't at Grants Pass, aren't at these other meets, and realize that you can't give you the day before when you're running back. And so we're going to have more bad tests from that as well without a lot
So
of
a
education.
separate agenda item for the future, maybe we could put down would be, how do we feel about running horses back to back? And what's that do to break down rates in that second race?
We ran
Something
those numbers
comes up.
several years ago, and I would
Did-
love to see, I don't know if the commission still has those. Dr. Cattler worked on that quite a bit.
That'd be
and
great to
we-
see.
We saw no difference, but
Okay, okay.
it just, they exist in the commission files somewhere. I know they do, because we worked on it, but.
Can I interject with a question?
Absolutely. Chair recognizes Commissioner Fowler.
Thank you. And this may be a really dumb question, but can you explain to me why a quarter horse can take so much more butte, for example, than a thoroughbred, and what that difference is about?
I'm not aware of that difference. Can you explain that to me or clarify
It's-
the question?
Well, I understood Dr. Lombard earlier saying that the same amount that's allowed isn't going to work for quarter horses as opposed to thoroughbreds. And so I understood that as meaning that it affects them differently in some way. And so maybe I'm just completely wrong on that.
It's not about the
Probably about
effect
it.
on the horse. So what has been greatly accepted is obviously thoroughbreds run further, right? So they're hitting the ground more times, and then the quarter horses. And so a lower amount of butte will, if they're given a higher amount of butte and they're running further, they're more likely to get sorenesses covered up by that butte in our pre-race exams and our analysis of them before the race. Whereas our quarter horses, they're not running as far, so they're not going to be. Tom, help me with words here. You and I talk about this with quarter horses and pre-race exams a lot. in quarter horses that they're just not having to run as far.
Well, I think just to clarify it, the quarter horses that we run in Oregon are probably genetically 7/8 thoroughbred, most of them, or 3/4. So there's no difference in the drug effect between the thoroughbreds and the quarter horses. The same amount of the same drug, regardless of what it is, will affect each horse similarly. So I don't think that the quarter horses are in any way different. The big difference is that HISA, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, only applies to thoroughbreds at this point. So in other jurisdictions that are HISA compliant, they have different rules for quarter horses versus thoroughbreds and different testing protocols. So our lab is a HISA certified lab. There's only 6 in the country that are, and the one that Oregon is using, University of Illinois at Chicago, is a HISA certified lab. And we do specify to the lab what breed the horse is when the test goes in, but there's no difference in the levels that are allowed or are effective in one breed versus another.
Dr. Everman, for folks who aren't maybe who are listening but aren't familiar with like appendix quarter horse, would you explain how quarter horses can be 7/8 thoroughbred?
Well, the quarter horse registry is much more open than the thoroughbred registry. Thoroughbred registry, basically, they brought 3 Arabian stallions to England in I don't know, maybe the 1800s, a long time ago. It was before I started paying attention. Alice might know, I don't know. But anyway, a long time ago, they brought 3 Arabian stallions from Egypt or Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure where they came from, to England, and they crossed into the heavy thoroughbred horses they had, and they made what we consider the modern thoroughbred. And they really haven't changed since then, other than the registry's been closed. Other than breeding a lot to one horse versus another, there hasn't been a huge change. And whereas the quarter horses started, Dave is on here, he could probably tell us, when did the quarter horse registry start? It was in the 1940s, or when was it, Dave?
It was 1941.
Yeah.
Prior to that, racing was conducted down Main Street in colonial times, and they would race 2 or 3 times a day.
Right. Well, the quarter horse registry was much more open, and it still is to this day. If a horse is a registered quarter horse stallion, he can breed various mares, and they can still be registered quarter horses. So we do have a lot of thoroughbred for the speed in the quarter horses today. And
That's Dr. Everman, it's a quarter horse, either a thoroughbred mare on a quarter horse stallion, or a thoroughbred stallion to a registered quarter horse mare can become an appendix horse. And if they perform and meet certain conformational requirements, they can become and move on to the permanent registry.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
Commissioner Barry, could I be recognized, please?
If I can figure out how to get my speaker on. Yes, Randy. Chair recognizes Randy.
It sounds like Randy's on mute now.
You're muted, Randy.
All right. Now it said it.
Turn your microphone on.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
good.
Oh.
Now you're muted.
It says mine says I'm muted right now.
But we can hear you.
Oh,
You're
well,
good now.
all right, so on we go. So yeah, I apologize for being late. I was making a couple of phone calls to a couple of my board members, who are active trainers, and just to kind of touch base with them. And in both cases, I guess what they really, we recognize Dr. Everman's concerns that Butte be utilized in a fashion that would mask a horse that as far as pre-race. But, for their part, they're talking again that because we get a lower class of horse to start with, and because many of our horses are older horses, we're only getting like 10 2-year-olds a year that are actually coming into the racing world. that, you know, the butte is just important from that standpoint. Um, you know, for these horses, and the same with on the Lasix to drop from 5 to 2.5 or wherever we're going to go with it. You know, no one's ever said that Lasix is anything but therapeutic, although they've argued it, I understand, but no one's ever shown that you could make Lasix a performance enhancing medication under any terms. So I guess I'm just advocating that we are very careful about some of this stuff, because it's not the same here in Oregon as it is in some places where you're getting a lot of high dollar thoroughbreds that are running. And, you know, when you've got thoroughbreds running into their 10th year and things like that, you have to make allowances just like we do for ourselves as we get older. So, you know, let's just be cautious before we get, you know, I know we're a long way from the end of this road, but I guess that's my initial thoughts and the initial thoughts of two of my trainers that I was able to get a hold of in short order. So
Thanks, Randy. It sounds to me like you're talking about arthritis that gets into the knees. I got a little of that. I bet you maybe have a little bit of that. Life well lived. Dr. Everman, what are your thoughts on older horses running? And Connie's talked about getting x-rays at the track. Would that pick up arthritis that we should be weeding out ahead of time? I mean, you guys are the experts, but these are questions that come to mind.
Well, it would be nice to have some more diagnostics, more attendant vets at the racetrack. The problem we have at Grants Pass, the fair mates would be an exaggeration of this, but even at Grants Pass in the fall meet, we only have 12 days of racing, maybe 13. So it's a pretty short meet, and you're not going to get many vets to move there or bring temporary housing there for that period of time. It's just not worth it. The veterinary practice I had in Grants Pass, the person I sold it to has not been able to get anyone else to even come there to work in 3 years of looking. So it's a problem. And I think that we should be not afraid to change the rules to benefit the horses, because a lot of these horses that are running on Butte don't need the Butte to start with. The horsemen just give it because it's allowed and everybody else is doing it, and they don't want to leave any stone unturned, and so they give it. When I say that 90+% of the horses running at Grants Pass are on phenylbutazone, you might think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. I've looked at the numbers and seen the medication reports. These horses are on Butte, and they don't all have to be. And we certainly don't want to run all our horses out of town so that we don't have enough to have a race meet. But a lot of these horses don't need this medication. And if they do, they should be correcting the problem. X-rays would not be a reason to eliminate a horse on pre-race exam. If they're sound, they're fit to race.
And I'm gonna just jump in here too. I really believe that I don't think that this is just my little brain, you know, I'm not the smartest person in the room, there's no doubt about that. But I don't think the argument is that our horses aren't good enough, therefore it's okay if they use drugs and hide their injuries is a good argument. I just don't get that. And I apologize that I'm dense on this one.
Sometimes density is good, Connie. That's you're absolutely right about that. Just because they're cheap horses doesn't mean we should run them on Butte. If they are not sound enough to race without the Butte, then they probably are not sound enough to be a racehorse anymore.
But also don't penalize the 95% for what the 5% might be doing. I mean, I don't.
Explain that.
Well,
Yeah, how are we penalizing them if we're trying to take care of the other horses?
nobody wants a horse that's lame to run, and you guys do a great job of identifying all that, and we're fully in support of you. But the lion's share, I mean, I don't know how you I don't know how you say a lot of these horses don't need the butte to start with, but how do you measure that? How do you show me where you go through the barn and pick out the ones that don't need butte? And so having said that, I mean, I'm just not sure. Why are you, what are you actually regulating away? I mean, it's not, what are you actually helping, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think the goal, Randy, is to say, don't bring lame horses to run in Oregon.
Yeah, no, but I don't think that, look, whether you're talking this last, and let me throw this out here. This last year at the commercial meet, the HBPA guaranteed all purses, which means that the horsemen did not have to wait for any of the tests to come back to collect their winnings. Now, had a horse come back with a bad test, it would have been on the HBPA to go get that money back of the purse that was taken away from that winning horse for having a bad test. So the HBPA had 74 races that we ran during the HRA live meet. And out of the 74 and any other random tests that the commission would have asked for that would have encompassed any horse from first through fifth, out of all those horses that were tested, not one test came back bad. Not one person did we have to chase down and say, give us back the purse. So if we don't have violations, and I'm not saying we should stop looking for them, I think we absolutely ought to do that. But you take that in mind that we're doing a good job of this. We really are. And
No, Rand, I agree. It sounds like compliance is high, and I think that's wonderful. We're talking about improving standards to increase athlete health. But I have nothing but respect for the way that I've seen the horsemen taking the rules seriously. I was the two meets that I went to, I was very, very impressed with the commitment I saw in folks wanting to have an honest race and follow the rules. I thought that was great. We're just talking about changing the rules to make the athletes safer.
Can I add something?
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Fowler.
It's hard for me. I feel like I raised my hand, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but it's hard for me to tell if you see me with the little split screen.
The video makes it tough to. No, go ahead, and I hope if you guys feel like the meetings start to run riot, we can rein it in. We can get much tighter on our Roberts rules. I kind of like to just hear what folks have to say, as long as everybody can be respectful and, as Commissioner Fowler just did, join the conversation assertively and appropriately. So go ahead. Chair recognizes Commissioner Fowler.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to respond to something that Randy was saying, and I appreciate that no one wants to run a horse that's lame, but then the question is, if the horse is off butte for over 2 days, is the horse still going to be completely sound? And I think that that's the issue we're trying to get at here is the butte just covering up something that needs to be considered before a horse is run?
Commissioner Barry,
Is that Rod?
Rod Lowe, yes.
Rod, go ahead, please.
So my only comment is I just what our discussion was before in the commission meeting is to come up with some kind of hybrid standard between what other states are doing around us, what HICE is doing, and then what we've done and what makes sense to that. So I don't know where these levels are. I know that it sounds like they're all trying to go to HISA, which I don't know if that's completely the right thing to do, but a hybrid between HISA and our states around us, and for both breeds. for quarter horses as well as thoroughbreds. I don't think you can just look at HISA because they are just a thoroughbred regulatory business. We need to look at quarter horses and thoroughbreds, what the neighboring states are doing, and come up with some logical levels for us to do in Oregon. And I don't know where that is, and maybe Dr. Everman can tell me where that is compared to what's been proposed, compared to what's around us and what we're doing now.
I would like to, before we go on to anybody else, I just want to bring up the, our end goal, as far as I understand it, the way that, and this is, I mean, our two commissioners here, they're the ones that are leading this, but what I'm hearing from them in the past is that they want to look at HISA, but they want what's best for the horses and to take that into consideration. And based on what I'm hearing, I have not heard a single thing that tells me that quarter horses in this particular case benefit from more bute than a thoroughbred does. I can't, and I'm a science gal too. I may not have a veterinarian degree, but I have a science degree, and everything I've always been taught, if it's the same for each of them, you can't just say, change it that way. It just isn't a logical argument to me. And
I
that's
wasn't talking specifically about bute. I was talking about all those, all the different regulations, whether it's bute or whether it's Lasix.
And I agree. I do agree that we have to look at it differently. And, you know, I mean, I'll tell you the truth, if I had my way, we wouldn't even use Lasix. But I know there's too many arguments on that, and that's for another day. But as far as bute is concerned, I'm done now, but I wanted to at least throw that out.
Thanks, Connie. Thanks, Rod. Oh, this is an active
Barry.
discussion.
It looks
Yeah,
like
is that
Dr.
Dave?
Lombard has a comment
Lombard.
or a question.
Oh, I see the hand there. Go ahead, Dr. Lombard.
Thank you. I just want to also remind you that we do things differently for quarter horses and thoroughbreds in several of our rules. I mean, just in this one here, we have clenbuterol separated out for quarter horses versus thoroughbreds. So it's not unheard of for that to be done. And there were reasons that clenbuterol was done, which we don't need to go into today. But there are, even with the plate rule that you guys are working on too, there are things that we are doing differently for quarter horses and thoroughbreds. And the Washington State quarter horses are running under the same that we were, that you guys are proposing to change to the RMTC, which is what Washington is running their thoroughbreds as. So there's a precedent for differences there.
What, Dr. Lombard, when there are differences, is that, in your opinion, more to do with the length they're running or with the breed of horse itself?
I think it's both, and I think it's also just, we have to remember that these creatures are running in multiple states, and so the horsemen are trying to stay within the rules of everywhere, and quarter horses are used to the rules that they're following, and the thoroughbreds are used to the rules that they're following, and so there's something to be said for that. And, you know, the argument that, you know, thoroughbred should be at 0.3, I could talk till I'm blue in the face. I think they should be 2 as well, but that's a whole another ball of wax I don't think we need to get into, because RMTC has decided that 0.3 is their threshold. And quite honestly, I take an Advil when I go for a longer run and I don't break down.
Okay. In the interest of time, I think this is a subject that we definitely need to carry on to our next meeting, but we also have a number of things that we want to get through today. So let's move on to our next item. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and contributions. I think this is how we're going to get to the best outcomes for all the stakeholders with an interest in Oregon racing. So thank you very much. Connie, what do we have up next? Necropsy?
Before we do necropsy, there were some, you know what, the changes that came up from the possible changes for the shoes, the plates. I think I'm going to take that up with Mike after he gets back from emergency leave. and Dr. Everman, before this group gets, before we look at any more here. So I guess that would be necropsies next.
Okay, yeah, and also my understanding from the commission was that they do want us to move forward in the process of all these things. They just had specific questions about those items. So we're going to keep moving forward with all those things, but we're only in the discussion phase at this point, and it's stuff that we can talk about at our next gathering. Is that,
So
do I have that right? Does that sound right?
I have a
Correct.
question. So at our next gathering, are we going to talk about the Lasix level changing and potentially adding bisphosphonates to this amendment? I think we've talked about this amendment enough, but there's more things to it. It's a thick one.
So you want to talk about the LASIK level now?
Well, it's part of this document, so that I don't know if we need to continue with this document. There's a lot else on the agenda. Just moving from moving the Lasix down to 250 milligrams is not in alignment with, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Everman, I can't find any other state that has it that low.
Well, I spoke to the director of our laboratory, and he recommends that we don't go below 3 on the minimum, 3 cc's, which would be 150 milligrams, or they may have a problem detecting it.
Right, and that's what we're at.
So that's the reason we have 3 as a minimum amount. The problem we have with a higher amount is it's really just causing dehydration in the horses. And Grants Pass tends to be, most of the time with the fair meets there in September, early October, tends to be hot in Grants Pass. And they're worried about dehydration anyway, whether the horse is on Lasix or not. We do have quite a few bleeders there, so I do think Lasix is a good therapeutic medication. And Connie suggested that we go to 3 hours instead of 4 pre-race, because that will help the horses more at the race time. And going higher than 5, I don't think is an added benefit to the horse. It may cause it to lose a little bit more water, and so the horseman would look at this as an advantage. But I think if they give 5 IV, 250 milligrams, they're going to experience all the benefit that they're going to get from that particular drug.
And
Right,
Dr.
just it's not in alignment with any other state.
One moment. Dr. Everman, didn't you say to me that you didn't think anybody was getting more than that currently anyway?
Well, we see the amount that they give when Dr. Jensen, who's been doing all the Lasix at Grants Pass, or at the fair meets, other veterinarians, they have to turn in a Lasix program that specifies the amount that they give the horses. And that's basically what they're giving is 4 or 5 cc's to these horses. Very few horses are getting 7, 8, 9, or 10 cc's. I mean, I haven't seen any get 10 cc's, which is our maximum amount that's allowable.
I guess it's the benefit and harm ratio there, because a horse that does bleed, that does need the 7 or 8, that can't get it now, if we go to 5 cc's, is going to bleed, and it's much more detrimental to the horse to bleed than to be dehydrated.
Well,
So guys,
I'd have to see
we
your
have heard-
data on that
wait.
to say that it's going to bleed.
Dr. Everman, please, thank you. I see as agenda item number 7, we have a discussion on bleeders. Do we want to address these 2 issues separately? Would we like to bring that agenda item up and incorporate it with this conversation? But they seem related. Should we be talking about them together, or do we need to separate them out into 2 separate conversations, bleeders and Lasix?
I think maybe going on to bleeders is a good segue into the next topic.
So maybe we just move straight into bleeders then? Is that what
yeah,
you're saying?
that's really where we are on this discussion.
I think, okay, so what I would like to hear opinions on, we've got horses that need to take a medication to run. Is that in line with the desires of Oregonians at large.
Well, the big problem is that originally, when Lasix was first used in racehorses, bleeders are called, they're called bleeders, but it's a exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage. Is not a nosebleed, it's a lung bleed, and it is detrimental to the horse. Whether the Lasix helps or not, or helps only through dehydrating the horse and lowering the pulmonary artery pressure to the lungs, is still not known. When you look at the research on this, it's absolutely not a knowable thing. How much Lasix is going to help which horse with bleeding, whether they will bleed or not is an unknown factor. We currently have a rule that if a horse does bleed at the racetrack, I think we had 3 that bled last year. And as I recall, 2 of the 3 were on Lasix and 1 was not. And their first bleed in a year is a 14-day suspension from racing. Second bleed is 30 days. Third bleed is 180 days. And the fourth bleed within a calendar year or a 365-day period is permanently barred from racing. And that never happens because on the third bleed, they get 180 days off. So basically, they never get a fourth bleed in a year. A person would be really foolish to attempt that. So how much Lasix helps, how much, which horse is not known. And the problem is that a lot of horses that are on Lasix now probably don't need it, and people are giving it mainly for the value of dehydration, lowering the horse's weight, so that the horse can hopefully win the race and get more purse money for them.
If Lasix were entirely out of racing in Oregon, would there still be horses to race in Oregon?
Well, I don't think we want to do that. That we do not.
I see Dr. Lombard is shaking her head no, and I hear I don't want to do that, but is it like, what would be the impact on racing?
It wouldn't be good.
What would it be?
Well, it would only have a negative
It would be
effect.
difficult to put a race meet on, let's put it that way.
Yeah, Randy's right.
Why? I mean, you'll have to pardon my ignorance. I just, I don't.
Because
What, yeah, what?
horses to fill the fields. I don't know that you would. Because again, remember how racing's set up with everything split into all the many different categories of, filly and male horses and all the different weight classes and all the different claiming prices and distances and you name it. So it doesn't take, you don't have to decrease the available pool of available horses by very much to eliminate a category.
There's so many. I just want to be clear because I want to make sure I understand this. You guys are saying there's so many horses that bleed from their lungs when they run hard in the populations of horses that you're running, that you couldn't find enough horses who don't do that to put a race together?
And I don't think that's what he said.
But that's, I mean, I'm inferring that. That's why I'm asking for clarification.
Well, a lot of the horses that are on Lasix now are not bleeders. When Lasix was first put into practice in racing, horses had to be certified that they did bleed, usually by scoping down into their lungs to see some trace of blood in the trachea or the bronchi way down deep that didn't show externally. And then a veterinarian would certify that, yes, they had bled so they could be on Lasix. Now that has gone away, and any horse that wants to run on Lasix can do so by declaring that that's what they're doing. And they're doing it mainly so they'll be equal to the other horses as far as weight loss, because they lose a lot of water. And that's the reason if you say you can't run on Lasix in this state, it's not because they're going to bleed. It's because they'll just choose to go somewhere else where they can use the Lasix because they'll think they're not going to win here. It'll be a problem. And I don't see a value in doing that.
In
Not an
addition,
well, I'm not an economist, but it seems to me that if some of your competition leaves, i.e. people with horses that bleed, you've got less competition and it's more appealing to enter the race. Am I
you only have enough competition if you have enough horses to enter that race. You can only have
Rod Lowe needs to get in on this. Yes, Rod. You're muted, Rod.
Yeah, so he didn't have anything to say.
Yeah, you're muted.
I want to give you my personal experiences as a horseman, as an owner, and from the racetrack. So the reason I agree with some of what Dr. Everman said, but as an owner of a racehorse, if you get a horse that does bleed, you are chasing that for a long period of time. If you give a preventative amount of Lasix to a horse that keeps it from bleeding in the lungs, your horse has a longer longevity to run races with. And my personal experience was last year or 2 years ago, I ran a 2-year-old in California at Los Alamitos racetrack. At that track in California, I don't know if it's all of California or just Los Alamitos, but 2-year-olds cannot run on Lasix. My horse bled in California. I chased that in California. I laid him off. I tried to run him back. I was given all the time that it would take to heal those lungs, kept the horse in training, ran it back, it bled again. Did the same thing, came to Oregon, gave it time off, ran the horse, it bled again. I had 3 bleeds in 3 races with giving it the amount of time that it was supposed to be able to heal those lungs up and not be able to bleed. I lost the whole 2-year-old year with that horse, and he was a good horse. He was a good horse that could have competed as a 2-year-old. If I was able to give a preventative Lasix shot to that horse as a 2-year-old, I might not have had that horse bleed all year long and lose the whole season. And I wasn't doing it because I thought the horse would run faster because it would weigh less. I did it so the horse wouldn't bleed. It prevented the horse from suffering, and it would have prevented the horse from suffering and would have prevented me from losing a whole year of trying to race that horse if I could have prevented that horse from bleeding.
I understand that, and I appreciate that, Rod. And I know this is a tough question because I know economics are at stake here, but I would like a clear answer on this from folks. What, if a horse has a tendency to bleed, why should it continue racing? Why isn't that a cult? Why don't we say that horse has a physical defect and it shouldn't race?
But Quinn, Mr. Barry, I brought that horse back as a 3-year-old and used it as Lasix and ran it 8 times this year. I was able to prevent that horse from bleeding in its 3-year-old year by using Lasix.
My understanding is that the process of getting horses with this condition to do that means that everybody else has to take Lasix as well and get on board. Why not just let horses that don't bleed run?
Well, you won't know that until you take it away. So if you want to take it away and see how many horses don't bleed, that's the experiment you're dealing with.
Well, and I would ask, how much Lasix was your horse getting? Because at this particular moment, we're not talking about getting rid of Lasix. Even Heise has come back and said that some Lasix may be necessary. So that's not what the question is right now. I think,
Yeah,
So yeah,
I think
part
that
of-
if we came through and we did LASIK at a lower level, and we found out that 50% of our population bled at that level, we do an emergency rule change.
Well, I think what you get into in that situation, Connie, is that with horsemen, they're kind of single-minded. When you take it away once, they depart and they don't come back. So if you do the emergency reversal, then you're going to have a stanza full of fans and no horses because they've left. But for Commissioner Barry, part of the problem with bleeders and with LASIKs and anything else that's touted as a control measure for bleeding is that the trainer or the owner or the jockey or nobody else really knows what's going to cause that horse to bleed. Is it heavy air? Is it light air? Is it cold air? Is it dry air? Is it warm air? Nobody is sure what precipitates that. And so everybody looks at that, as Rod said, and said, this is the best preventative that we've got, and it's the best thing for the horse. And it's not the best thing for the horse to take it away. So I sold a horse in California. He didn't run on LASIK as a 2-year-old, won a couple of races, came back. We ran the other night and I looked down the list and there was 3-year-old horses. There was 100% of them were on LASIKs, and they were on LASIKs because it was a foggy night and or whatever their reasons were. But as I said, nobody is sure what precipitates the horse to bleed the first time. If you knew, you could do a lot of different things, but you don't know.
thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. Okay, well, and I don't want us to get too far afield. But because bleeders are kind of a subject, they're a relevant subject, I want to get as much information as I can about it. Connie, where would you like to go next? We've kind of gotten jumbled in the agenda a little bit. I don't know, do we want to go to necropsy or do we want to continue on from here?
Why don't we, so let's just go ahead and discuss necropsy, because I think on this one, the big thing was that Karen and I were going to do some research and see if there was some other options, and we just wanted to give you what we heard. So you have that information and some ideas that we had just to throw out there. One is that we had thought that perhaps we could offer a bonus of a set amount. You know, maybe if a horse breaks down and it's a hot day and somebody has to drive them to OSU, the Oregon Racing Commission gives them $800 plus fuel. So, because it is a hassle to drive down there, we get that. You know, that's a possible option, is that we give the Oregon Racing Commission already pays for the necropsy. We could also pay, heck, we may even have some staff that might want to do it for that. But that somebody drives them down there and we give them some kind of cash. The other option is, Karen had looked into, and Karen, you're on, maybe you can talk about this, into what it might cost to either buy an old truck and then we have to store it, or lease a truck that's refrigerated. So there's an option for that. One of the things that, you know, we could do is we could ask in the budget, and now's the time, for the money to buy a refrigerated truck. Karen, do you have any information on that?
What I had checked on was a trailer. It was a refrigerated trailer, and it was $26,000. So somebody would have to have a rig to pull it. And I was being facetious, but I certainly could do it. When Connie and I were talking, I said, I can pull the darn thing. I've been hauling trailers for about 1,000 years, so I could do it. But it's not that hard to pull a trailer if you have a rig. And most of the horsemen have a rig.
So those were a couple options that we came up with, and I don't know, you know, maybe fair meets in other states, and this is a question for Dr. Lombard, maybe none of the fair meets do necropsies, but we we can't do necropsy. I mean, just doing them in a commercial track doesn't make sense because they only do it a few days a year. Yes.
I have
What-
one question about horsemen transporting. Does that create a chain of custody issue? I mean, is there potential for tampering? I don't know that anybody would, but maybe Dr.
Well-
Everman would have a better idea about that than.
And theoretically, we would have already drawn blood from that horse before it leaves.
Okay, okay, so there would be no way to game it while it was in the trailer somehow or anything like that.
Wouldn't you be able to tell if it had been, if, for example, some drug had been added after it was put in the trailer because it wouldn't circulate through the system?
That's exactly right. There's no circulation in a dead horse, so injecting any foreign substance would be of no value.
Okay, okay, very good.
Dr. Lombard has her hand up.
Several, probably 15, 20 years ago, there was a huge grant, and I think there are some more back available that Washington State University got working with the Washington Racing Commission, and all horses euthanized on the backside or on the track went to WSU, and they did full necropsies, and they also did some MRIs and some stuff with all of that and published some papers out of that. So I don't know if that would be worth the commission looking into, talking to OSU and maybe some of the residents there in the large animal department or in the imaging department, because it was a pretty big grant. Every single horse that died at Emerald Downs went to WSU, and it was all covered by the grant.
That seems like a good thing. Connie, is that something we could look into further with maybe a point in the right direction from Dr. Lombard?
Yeah, perhaps, I have to tell you, they aren't that expensive, and hopefully we're not gonna have that many that we're sending every year. This year was a real fluke. But
Boy, gee,
we
yeah,
only
that's
paid-
right.
We only paid $395 for the necropsies. It was incredibly inexpensive.
So Connie, the trip cost 1,000.
Well, what if we gave you 1,000 for it? I mean,
That's fine.
yeah.
fine.
And I was just throwing out a number of 800, but you know, would that help if we gave $1,000 to whoever made the trip?
Sure.
Because I think that's totally fair that we pay for that.
If we wanted imaging done, like MRIs or something on as part of a necropsy, would that make it cost prohibitive? Or
I would imagine so, unless it was a teaching case of some kind. I mean, OSU is always looking for different teaching cases, and they have access to a lot of different grants for different things like that. And I know some of the national organizations, especially with the HISA stuff going on and a lot of the stuff happening on the East Coast, there's quite a bit of money getting thrown around for some of this stuff that they might be able to tap into with our collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth it. Although they did do imaging on ours for that price.
Did they?
Yeah,
Is
they
there
take extras.
Mr. Chair Barry.
Oh, yeah, thanks for recognizing me. I appreciate it.
That's me.
That's pretty good. Oh, boy.
I had a full born at Dr. Root's place a couple of years ago, and it had died almost immediately, and it was born at 355 days or something like that. It was almost hairless. Its upper jaw was longer than its lower jaw. We rushed it down for an autopsy to Oregon State. It was necropsied thoroughly. Many samples were then parceled out to other universities because they didn't have the laboratory sensitivities to do zincs and everything else. And the nearest that we could tell are that when in the summer, I had a duck pond on the southeast corner of the place, and the mares got drinking out of that and maybe had nitrification poisoning in that caused, just at a particular period of time in that foal's development, caused it to be malformed. my whole point is that a necropsy is not the end all of finding out the cause. So you have to be sure of what you're asking for. If the answer comes back, we don't know, then that's what you got.
Yep.
Just get an answer.
Yeah, I think Director Wynn is pretty committed to getting this done, and I'm supporting her on it. I think, yeah, maybe we'll get an answer, maybe we won't, but I think, you know, for what it costs, it's worth it. Presuming the rest of the racing commissioners agree with Connie, it's worth it to us to get it done.
I agree with you, Commissioner Barry. This is Lindsay Fowler.
And Dr. Lombard, perhaps you and I can touch base sometime about how to best contact OSU.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So some detailed stuff, but basically we're gonna work on getting these necropsies done and then move that up to the commission at some point to make a decision about. Do we want to move on to Dr. Everman's presentation on the Stride Safe?
Yeah, I think that would be good. And then also, I think we could skip number 4. I think we have enough on our plate right now. We have to work through these before we worry about anything else.
Agreed.
Everybody agree with that? Because this is my recommendation.
I see heads nodding, so it doesn't sound like anybody disagrees. Okay, Dr. Everman, take it away, please.
All right, well, I have to tell you that it's very unfortunate that we had a Zoom meeting instead of in person, because I had this nice handout, which I don't know if my computer camera's gonna get this or not, but anyway, I had this handout made for everybody that's in here, a whole folder full of them, and now I'm gonna throw them away but if you want to go on YouTube and sit through an 1.5-hour presentation on Stride Safe, it's there. There is a YouTube presentation on this. That's a kind of a town hall type meeting where 2 people, the CEO of Stride Safe and Will Farmer, who's the head veterinarian at the state level in Kentucky at Churchill Downs, they give this presentation and then take a lot of questions. Yeah, basically what happens is Stride Safe is a sensor device. It's like a cell phone. It's transmitted to a satellite. And what's happening is that the information that Stride Safe produces, it gives 2,400 readings per second with all these sensors about the horse's movement. And it shows these on a graph form to the people, and they read it after the races are over or after work is over. So it's really not something that would be a reason to eliminate a horse. It's not something that we're going to use. It's still in the development experimentation stage at this point. It's not really useful for us. Their average number of uses was multiple per horse. It costs about $35 per use per horse per time it's used. And it takes multiple uses in order to establish what normal movement looks like in that particular horse. And a lot of things can produce abnormal findings or movements in the horse, such as sand in their face, losing a shoe, a whole host of things other than a catastrophic breakdown. Normal findings to show up on Stride Safe sensors. And in any case, it's a very interesting bit of research that's happening with racehorses right now, but it's not ready for prime time, and it's not something that Oregon could utilize in races. It takes a special saddle pad and a number of sensors are put in there, and it measures the movement of the horse, whether it's symmetrical or not, but it does not specify whether it's front limb, back limb, right side or left side that's abnormal. So it really gives information that the Stride Safe administrators can go to the trainer and he can send the horse for diagnostic workup by a veterinarian or a horseshoer, or he can look at the horse himself or talk to the jockey or the rider of the horse and see if they had something that happened that they're aware of that caused the horse to move abnormally. So there are a number of these devices that are on the market right now, not marketed, but in the experimental stages to see if they would be useful to identify horses that are potentially going to be injured in racing or eventing or any other type of competition. And right now, go ahead, Connie.
I was just going to add to that, maybe you were going to say this, but I was just going to add that one of the things I do know is they cannot use this on quarter horses. They tried, but their stride is so much different. It's not effective for quarter horses.
Yeah, it's only been used effectively on thoroughbreds in longer races, and even there, well, the horses that it does not identify abnormalities in horses that have sudden deaths due to cardiovascular problems or ligament tendon injuries like bowed tendons, suspensory ligament ruptures that happen all at once. It's mostly going to identify horses that have lamenesses that are related to the skeletal system that are not visible on pre-race exam, just jogging and slow speed, and only show up when the system is really stressed, as it is in racing.
I would say though, with all that said, even though it's financially expensive right now, there are opportunities. One of the things that we've done recently, Karen Parkman is going through grant writing training. So there are opportunities. If we find something, I don't think we should say off the top of the bat, we can't afford it, because there may be other sources of income out there besides the hub funds, because we want to guard those hub funds. We need those just to keep us alive. But if we find something that's really good, I don't want us to ever think that the money's going to stop us. I want us to look at other options first. So I just want you to think about that. Let's not ever say, oh, we just can't afford that. Secondly, with that, I agree. I think the technology is still too new. And good job, Dr. Everman, on your research on that. But I do think we should keep watching it, because it could potentially be helpful in the future.
Well, it'd be especially helpful for trainers to put this type of tracking on their horse when they're doing a work and see if there's something that they're not seeing back at the barn or in a pre-race exam.
You know, Director Nguyen and Dr. Lombard both mentioned grants. And it seems to me that while this might not be ready for prime time, you mentioned that it's still interesting research, Dr. Everman. I wonder if there's potential for us to get involved in improving the state of knowledge on these things. I think this is one of the most frustrating things this committee has to deal with, is that there's a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily know. And until we do, it's going to be hard to make a reasonable decision about what should we do to keep everybody as safe as we possibly can. I'd certainly welcome any opportunities we had to contribute to learning about how do we keep racehorses as safe and jockeys as safe as possible. I guess that's more commentary than anything. It just seems like there's opportunity there.
Yes, Rod. Rod, you're muted. You're muted, Rod. Rod, you're muted.
Sorry, I got it. Sorry. I've sat through a couple of these seminars, both quarter horses and thoroughbreds. I thought I heard in one of those that it doesn't work on bull ring type tracks. I didn't think that worked for our half-mile tracks like we have in Oregon. I thought it had to be on mile tracks or more.
I remember hearing that somewhere as well.
Yeah, so I don't think it works in Oregon, period.
Hmm.
At least not now, because we have half-mile tracks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
again, sorry.
oh, no, go ahead, Director Wing, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. That might be true. I know that it's not good for quarter horses, and maybe that's where that's coming from, because the quarter horse's gait is so much different than a thoroughbred, and it tends to be less regular anyway. They're just not as smooth in their gait. Like I know what I'm talking about. Okay, but this is what I've been told. So I don't know if that's the issue or if it's actually the size of the track. Either way, I think we should keep our eye on this and watch on it. And I agree. I think what Commissioner Barry, our chair, is saying is, why not see if we can get involved in some of this testing of some of these things, if possible, so we can, as opposed to waiting, sometimes if we're not going to have to pay a lot of money for it, why not be part of the research?
It would be nice to be able to tell them what they're screwing up before it gets foisted on prime time, perhaps. And being part of that process, we'd get to say, hey, yeah, that's great, but maybe you should consider this also, rather than at some point, something like that maybe does come down. I don't, but yeah, Director Wynn, I think you're absolutely right. This is something to keep an eye on.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
last, I would just say, Dr. Lombard has worked with the people up in Washington, and they have this. I don't know if she has any final thoughts on it or information that we didn't say.
No, I think you guys covered it pretty well.
Great.
Well, I talked to Dr. Friedman at Washington at Emerald Downs about Stride Safe use there. And he said that they only reported to the trainers and that they didn't tell the state veterinarians anything about their findings. And he was pretty negative about it in general. So this may not, while this particular product might not be the one for us, there may be something coming. Usually what happens with this type of research is that multiple agencies, this is based in Australia. So there may be something that's based in the United States that comes along pretty soon that copies this and maybe is even better.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Thank you very much, Dr. Everman. I appreciate your presentation. Sounds like the tech's not there yet, but we're going to keep an eye on it. We said we're going to move over number 4. Micah, you want to go ahead with the tip line report?
Sure, thank you. Committee Chair Barry, Commissioner Fowler, and committee members. I reached out to several other state racing agencies regarding their experiences with tip lines. I wanted to find out how it worked for them and figure out how they address public records considerations for anonymous reports, thanks to input from Kelly over at the DOJ's office. I had great feedback from one I'd like to share. It was an East Coast state with lots of live racing. I think they have at least 4 tracks, a lot of commercial meets there. They started a tip line a couple of years ago. They had a lot of calls initially. Over the past 2 years, probably about 200 altogether. Most of them turned out to be not legit. Disgruntled ex-employees or whatnot, just creating trouble. So the investigators were able to figure out quickly what is legit, what's worth following up, what isn't. A couple of the tips did lead to investigations that uncovered various mistreatments and subsequent fines. That alone, in their opinion, was worth all the time and energy that they put into putting that up and out to the public. Public record considerations really wasn't something they were concerned about. While there was an investigation undergoing, they don't comment about ongoing investigations. And once it's over, they can go in and redact any personal information from stuff that comes in. So there's room to address any, I guess, anonymous reports that come in appropriately for when we send out any public record requests. They also noted they've had 0 public record requests regarding any of those anonymous calls. Bottom line, it was a low-cost effort, an easy addition that it seemed to have positive outcome, and they strongly recommended it. I looked into the technical considerations around it. It seems like the most easiest deployment would be using a Google Voice. It's about $20 a month. It can do take recordings. It'll do voice to text and send out the email, the transcript of what whoever called in said. I don't know about Spanish. I just now realize I should probably check on that. It was an easy component that can be shared amongst many of the ORC staff. I think the most challenging component is coordinating payment. Really, it seems like an easy win, an easy thing to set up and get out there. Google Voice even said that give us a free 14-day, I guess, test environment. Probably something we could look into doing and just run some tests internally and not publish a number. I think Executive Director Wynn said this would be Oregon centric, so we don't need an 800 number. $20 a month seems like an easy thing to do. That's all I've got to say.
It sounds like you feel like it's worth pursuing at this point, Micah.
I concur.
Anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? I can't see everybody's face, so if anybody's on mute, anybody see anybody waving or?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
It sounds like lay out the specific plan, and do we want to review it again in this committee or present it directly to the commission?
Do we need
that
to
make-
review it again in this committee if we're all in agreement that it's
You know,
appropriate?
if Micah feels like if it's implementable and nobody at the racing commission is saying, no, this is going to be a pain in our butts and we can't do it, and nobody is saying we shouldn't do it, I would say, yeah, Micah, put a plan together, bring it to full commission, we'll have a vote on it. And I assume everybody will say, great job, Micah, thanks for your good work.
I don't know, Connie, does this even need approval? This is.
Maybe, yeah, that's a good question.
I think this is something I almost could, under my own initiative.
Keep going.
The thing is about reimbursement of $20 a month.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Connie, you're the executive director. This sounds like it's operations level stuff.
I think Mike can handle it. We'll take care of it though. We'll go
Good.
from here and we'll go forward.
Great job.
I'm sorry.
I think the next one we can skip, and just to give you a really high level, the international standards had to do with the way that the stewards were judging races. It's a little technical and it doesn't work for quarter horses. This is one of those things that if we adopted, it would only be for thoroughbreds. And Mike needs to be part of that discussion, so we'll just table that one.
Okay. Do we have, what time are we at?
We have one last one and then we should get out of here.
Yeah, so do we want to go straight to the omeprazole? Am I saying that? Am I even saying that right?
Omeprazole, close enough.
Omeprazole. There you go, omeprazole. That's okay. That sounds right. Where would you like to start on that, Connie?
I will say that someone in the horse racing industry brought this to my attention, so I thought I would bring it to the commission. I talked to Dr. Everman, and he agreed that it would be worth bringing to the commission. Dr. Everman, can you talk a little bit about what omeprazole is? I have myself taken omeprazole for stomach issues before and stopped taking it for the same reason that we're going to discuss.
Well, it's a treatment for stomach ulcers, which the housing for thoroughbreds and quarter horses at a racetrack where they only get out once a day and either go to the racetrack or get put on a hot walker or both, and then get put back in the stall for 23 hours is a really good situation to develop stomach ulcers. These are young, really active, highly fed horses, and they're mostly confined. So a lot of these horses can benefit from ulcer medication. They'll prevent the formation, help healing of stomach or upper small intestine, duodenal ulcers. And my wife has a horse, a show horse that gets stomach ulcers, and we give it esomeprazole, which it's even cheaper, and it's available generically, and it's very easy. We give it in a fig Newton to that horse. It works very well that way. You just give it orally. And HISA has recognized that this is an important therapeutic for race horses. It doesn't affect racing performance or any performance in any way. And it just keeps the horses healthy. And so what they've done is said, because this medication is supposed to be given every day, that the people can give it the day 24 hours before the race, the day before, and then as soon as the race is over, so they don't actually miss a day. And even though they go a little bit more than 24 hours with the one administration, because the horse just kept on this as long as they're in the situation where they would develop an ulcer. So yes, I think it's valuable. The idea that the medication is going to cause decalcification of bones is a laboratory experimental finding, and has not been shown in practice to cause problems in horses or any other animal for that matter. And undoubtedly the benefits outweigh the downsides of the drug.
Dr. Everman, I had some information I had talked to you about the possibility of omeprazole hurting the bones and causing degeneration.
Well, that's a laboratory finding that has not been shown in actual practice to be a reality. And the benefit, I think, far outstrips in the housing that we have in the United States for racehorses. The benefits far outweigh any potential risk factors that might be involved in this situation. I have not seen that in veterinary practice, that there was any increase in fractures in horses on this medication or any weakness or pain in their bones. And while it's maybe a laboratory finding that it could cause some decalcification, in reality, in practice, that hasn't been shown, and there haven't been any studies that have shown in practice relationship of this that I'm aware of.
What action, is there an action that is being recommended?
Commissioner Barry, we're not suggesting or recommending any change to the rules of the commission at this point in time. It's just, this is informational only, in the sense that some of the commission members or some of the public that's listening to this may not be aware of that horses even get stomach ulcers. And actually, it's a very common problem in horses when they're confined and fed and exercised a lot, and they don't get time freely out in a big field to run around and blow off steam. And they're young, they're active, and we set up a situation where stomach ulcers are extremely common in racehorses. And so treating that is a logical thing to do.
So my assumption is that it would be cost prohibitive to create a situation where the young horses that were at the track had a chance to get out and be at pasture and liberty and do what they wanted to do.
Well, the first thing they would do is hurt each other. So that's just not going to happen.
Right. Yeah. They need individual paddocks and this. Yeah. So it's just not, that's not a feasible solution. So this is the next best thing.
Yes. It's something that's beneficial to the horses, and we shouldn't rule it off because the horses need it and it's helping them.
Good. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else have any questions? I think Leah has a question.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make one little suggestion. I guess it's a suggestion. Anyway, we keep talking about quarter horses and which we love that because we love our quarter horses. But and we talk about what goes on in Washington and neighboring states or whatever. But keep in mind that the state of Washington has no quarter horse races anymore, except there's 2 races a year at Emerald Downs that are quarter horse races. They're challenge races. And that's the extent of the racing because Kennewick has closed down. And so there is no racing anywhere else. So Oregon is it really, other than California.
Thanks, Leah. You know, I kind of abhor complexity. Do we need a subcommittee for quarter horses and thoroughbreds? How, you know, talking about them together, some of it really matches up and some of it is very different. We certainly value both. What, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think if Randy and the thoroughbred people and Dave and I mean, you know, we're interested in all of this. So if we can continue to be on the committees and participate, then, you know, I think that's good. That's all we need, I think. Randy, what do you think?
No, I'm fine. I mean, I think that we have a kind of unique relationship anyway in Oregon. I mean, the thoroughbred and the quarter horse folks work hand in glove with everything we do. So, I mean, I don't think there's any really benefit in splitting them apart because we all really have the same goals and we recognize the value each of us brings to racing in Oregon. Neither side would exist without the other. So we got to go.
Yeah, I like big tents. That sounds good to me. All right. Well, thank you for that comment, Leah. I think that's a good conversation for us to have had. That is the last item I have. Anything else, Director Nguyen?
I think the biggest question
Public
we need to have is when do we want to meet again? I mean, there's a lot going on.
There's a
But
lot
you
going
guys
on.
are busy and I know that you guys are, it's that your time is important. So I'll let that be up to the 2 of you. This is a really
Do we
important
want
thing
to
to you,
meet?
there's no doubt.
Is there anything that we feel like we need to talk about before the next committee meeting or before the next commission meeting? Sorry, that we need to have prepared for them or referred to them, or is this all stuff that maybe we can kick the can down the road? You know, Mike is going to move forward with his tip line. Well, okay, so from today's meeting, I've got we need to talk more about med levels. The necropsy thing sounds to me like it's ready. If a decision needs to be made by the commission, we can refer that to the commission. We've had a pretty full conversation. You have your recommendation, Director Nguyen. Stride Safe is not there. We're going to keep an eye on it, but otherwise it won't be included in old business next time around. Discussion on possible. Okay, we skipped number 4, so that'll go to old business the next time we meet. How soon does that need to be? Number 4. When do we need to have some sort of decision or resolution on that, Connie?
Number 4 was hang on. You know what? I don't think we're going to get anything necessarily meaningful done before the next meet. We have to be careful of our timing on all of that.
Agreed. So maybe
we may have to. I mean, that's a longer term thing at this point.
Okay, very good. Tip line, Mike is going to move forward with that. The discussion on international standards, that can go to old business for a meeting in maybe a month or so. The discussion on bleeders will be ongoing. Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Everman for presenting on the omeprazole. I wasn't, yeah, that was very, very interesting information. Doesn't sound like there's anything we really need to do before next month. Do we want to do a quarterly or do we want to do a monthly?
Dr. Lombard you're on mute. Ha, it wasn't me this time.
I will just say that any medication changes that you think are going to happen before the next meet, the more time you can give Horseman, the better.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any. Are we planning on making changes before the next? I mean,
Yes,
before the next meet, do you mean 2025?
2024.
Yeah, I don't think we're planning on springing anything in 2024 at this point, are we?
I'm gonna let our other commissioner talk, but I think some of these we should be looking at for this time.
For this
And
meet? Well, then that we need to get resolution on quickly.
quicker, yes, because we have to have
So
lots of time to communicate.
Well, do we want to refer it? Do we want to just refer it to the commission? Do we want to draft some? I guess
Your
we need to have a draft. To the
your
commission.
other commissioner is throwing balloons, trying to get your attention.
Oh, guys, see, and I don't have all the. Go ahead.
I didn't throw balloons. I don't know how that happened. I just raised my hand. It seemed to me that on the prohibited substance amendment, there were a whole lot of other drugs that we wanted to talk about. Am I remembering that correctly? Dr. Lombard had other comments she wanted to make about different drugs. And so perhaps that's something that we need to do sooner rather than later.
So maybe a specific
wanna make
meeting for
those changes for this
medications
year.
within the next week or two? Is that possible next week or two?
Looks like we also have some comments from iPhone. When iPhone comes back,
That's tag.
I thought it was. I couldn't tell for sure with his angle. Tag, if you're still on there, we want to hear from you. If not, we'll get you later.
Yeah, so I'd be open to a meeting in the next week or two specific to any medication changes that we would make, because we definitely want to get that done for everybody as quickly as possible and have resolution on the issue. Does that sound right? Do you I guess as far as dates, any Commissioner Fowler, do you have any to propose? You may have a tighter schedule than I do right now.
I do actually. I only have three jury trials scheduled in the next 2 weeks. I could make Monday or Tuesday of next week work, or Monday or Friday of the following week work. And I'm pretty free as to time wise.
Oh, Monday. You said Monday or Tuesday of next week?
Yeah, so the 22nd, 23rd, 29th, or 2nd.
Could you make? Could we do a 12:30 on the 23rd?
That works for me.
Okay, and we'll do it remotely so everybody can bring their lunch.
I will not be able to be there.
Darn. Could you prepare comments, or do you probably really want to be there in person? Frankly, I'd like to be able to ask you questions.
I would too.
What about, could we do Tuesday at
Tuesday now.
1:30? Tuesday's out.
Completely. That's
Darn.
my one bad day. The other ones I could probably make something work.
Monday evening, sometime after 7. Is that way too late for everybody? We've got staff. They couldn't do that. Geez, what am I thinking?
I could do 4 in the morning, but not 7 at night.
You're gonna be lonely.
I'll be there.
Maybe awake, but I don't know if I'll be here.
Well, shoot. How about, okay, you said the Friday.
Are the weekends better? We can meet on the weekend if we have to.
That's fine too.
Fine with me.
You know, I could probably do Friday the 26th. I've got a presentation, but I've got a partner and I think he could probably take over for a couple hours. What time would work on Friday the 26th? Is that what we're looking? Yeah.
Later in the day.
Or no,
would
you
be
weren't looking at Friday the 26th. You were looking at
Friday
would
the
that be
2nd.
the 2nd. I could do any time on Friday the 2nd. That may just be the soonest we can meet. Does that work for you, Dr. Lombard?
Yep, I'm open that day.
Okay, what time would we like to do that at? I can do it whenever makes everybody else happy.
Early's good for me.
How Connie will join you at 4 in the morning.
Hey,
If you
well,
wanna-
hang on. I think Tom is on vacation that day, are you?
Yes, I'll be gone that day, but I could talk to you beforehand, and I did like Dr. Lombard's comment about putting the bisphosphonates. A lot of our commissioners may not be aware of what bisphosphonates actually are and how they work.
Yeah.
The problem is that the laboratories are not able to test for them, but we could still make them a prohibited substance. And
Like the shockwave and stuff.
they would be something to be found mainly in a postmortem examination, something that could be detected on a postmortem exam. We could request that specifically, that they send in samples for that, because what happens with bisphosphonates, there's a couple of commercially available products. The osteoclast bone resorption around a fracture. And what they do is, for a long time, they didn't know why this happened, but they cause a cessation of pain from microfractures in bone. And so the horses don't feel pain when they have these microfractures, which without the medication, the horsemen a lot of times don't even know or really even care why they cause the horse to be better. They just don't see any lameness anymore. So that's good, right?
And it causes weakening of the bone.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you're racing the horse, the bone might break. The fact that the horse doesn't feel it before it breaks, that's irrelevant. But
Doctors Everman and Lombard, could I talk you guys into maybe having a conversation about the list of medications and having recommendations, and if there are any points that you don't agree on, just a little explanation of that maybe before the next meeting? Because I want, man, I am really interested in this stuff, and also I want to kind of have respect for folks' time, and I respect both of you guys very much. Yeah, if you guys could do that, that would sure be appreciated.
Sure.
Wonderful. Okay, so Friday the 2nd. How does everybody feel about 7 a.m. is probably too early, but how about 8 a.m.?
Perfect.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, 8 a.m. Friday, February 2nd. Med Safety Committee. I have it in my calendar. I will see you guys there. I'll look forward to it. Thanks everybody for your participation. Thank you for people enduring my devil's advocacy, but it helps me understand things. So I hope nobody takes it as being overly aggressive, but I really do appreciate the information you guys all give to me, and the patience you have for my questions. With that, it is 5:15 p.m. and I move to adjourn. Anyone? No? All right.
I second that if that needs a second.
Hey, you know what? It doesn't, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I haven't seen you guys since the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. It's a little late in the month for it, but we'll see you all on the 2nd. Take care. Bye.
Sorry I didn't get to meet all you guys in person this
Oh
week.
man, what a bummer.
April. We'll meet in April.
Indeed.
All right. Bye.